My name is Maya, and I count other people's money for a living. Christmas Eve, my mother stood in front of her fireplace holding a sheet of paper she'd printed in 16-point font. She cleared her throat and read aloud the names of the grandchildren who, her phrase, had earned gifts this year. My daughter Sophie's name wasn't on it. My daughter Lily's name wasn't on it. Renee's boys were first and second. Renee smiled at me from across the room, and my mother kept reading as if two of her grandchildren simply did not exist. I didn't argue. I walked to the tree, picked up a red-wrapped box no bigger than a jewelry case, and set it in my mother's lap. The papers inside had already been filed 3 weeks earlier. The signatures that mattered were already dry. And the number printed on the first page, well, I'll get to that. Welcome back to Still Ledger Stories. Quiet women, impossible families, and the moment the table finally turns. If a family ever made you feel like love was something you had to earn, you'll understand this one. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe, because what my mother read off that first page is something I still can't unsee. I should back up. My full name is Maya Holloway, and I'm a forensic accountant at a mid-sized firm in Raleigh. I audit expense reports, trace missing receivables, reconstruct ledgers that other people tried to destroy. It's not glamorous. Most of my work happens in spreadsheets at 2 in the morning, cross-referencing deposit slips against bank statements while my coffee goes cold. I'm good at it, not because I'm brilliant, because I'm patient. And numbers don't lie if you sit with them long enough. Growing up in the Weston household, patience was the only currency I had. My parents, Carol and Frank, never asked my younger sister Renee to handle the taxes or co-sign insurance paperwork or drive 4 hours to notarize documents for the family business. That was my department. I was the reliable one, the one who read the fine print, the one who showed up. I built that reputation the way you build a retaining wall, one careful brick at a time, and I was proud of it. I put myself through a CPA program at night while working full-time at a logistics company. I married James Holloway, a structural engineer who speaks in blueprints and rarely raises his voice. We had Sophie, then Lily. We bought a small house with a fence that still needs painting. Everything we have, we earned on our own hours. I never asked my parents for money. I never needed to. And when they needed me to sign something, I signed, because that's what the reliable one does. Being the reliable one is how they got my signature in the first place. I just didn't know it yet. Let me draw you the family map. My mother, Carol Weston, 64, retired school administrator. My father, Frank Weston, 67, who spent most of his adult life running a small general contracting company in Forsyth County. My sister Renee, 38, single mom to twin boys, Carter and Marcus, age 10. And then there's me. The family gathers at my parents' house every Christmas Eve. Always has. Same living room, same artificial tree with the star. My grandmother crocheted in 1991. Same tray of Carol's pecan rolls, cooling on the kitchen counter. 2 years ago, my mother introduced what she called the list. She printed a document, white paper, serif font, taped to the mantel beside the stockings, titled Grandchildren Who Have Earned Gifts This Year. She said it was about accountability. She said children needed to understand that effort led to reward. Carter and Marcus were on the list. Sophie and Lily were not. When I asked why, my mother folded her arms and told me my girls hadn't shown enough appreciation this year. Sophie was 7, Lily was 4. I didn't know what appreciation a 4-year-old was supposed to show. I asked Renee, who'd been arranging presents under the tree, if she thought it was strange. She barely looked up. She just said the list was fair and that maybe I should work on my kids' manners before complaining. My father sat in his armchair and said nothing. He turned up the volume on the football game. That was the first Christmas. I drove home that night with 2 daughters in their car seats who didn't understand why they'd watched their cousins open presents while they sat with nothing. I told myself it wouldn't happen again. It happened again. Last Christmas played out like a carbon copy. The list went up on the mantle. Same serif font, same title, same 2 names, Carter and Marcus, and nobody else. My mother handed out gifts wrapped in silver foil. Renee's boys got gaming tablets. They got matching winter coats with Sherpa lining. They got gift cards tucked into ornament envelopes. Sophie sat on the carpet next to me and watched. She didn't cry. She just pulled at the hem of her dress and whispered, "Why doesn't Grandma have my name?" I didn't have a good answer. I had excuses. Maybe Grandma forgot. Maybe there was a mix-up. But they tasted like ash before they even left my mouth. I looked at my sister. Renee was helping Marcus peel the plastic off his new tablet screen. She caught my eye and gave me a half smile, the kind that isn't really a smile at all. "Maybe next year if they behave," she said. The way you'd comment on the weather. like it cost her nothing. My father peeled the label off his beer and studied the carpet. My mother told me, without looking at me, that I was welcome to bring something for the girls myself if it mattered that much. As if the issue was logistics. As if my daughters had been left off a grocery list and not a measure of who counted and who didn't. I packed up my kids that night and drove 45 minutes home in the dark. Sophie fell asleep holding a candy cane someone had given her at the door. One candy cane. That was her Christmas from the Weston family. And for the second year, I told myself I'd handle it differently next time. The group text came in mid-November. My mother's preferred management tool. Christmas Eve at our house, 5 p.m. Bring a side dish. Children should be on their best behavior! Exclamation point. The last line sat on my screen like a splinter. Dean read it over my shoulder and set his jaw. You don't owe them a performance, Maya? He was right. I knew he was right. But Sophie had already seen the text. She'd been standing behind me in the kitchen, reading over my arm the way 9-year-olds do, and before I could put the phone down, she was already talking. Can we make cards for Grandma and Grandpa? I want to draw a snowflake. Lily can do the glitter. She said it with so much hope that I felt my chest tighten. Lily came running in 30 seconds later, already asking for the craft scissors. They spent 3 weekends making those cards. Sophie drew a snowflake with uneven points and wrote, Merry Christmas, Grandma and Grandpa. Love, Sophie, in her best printing. Lily covered hers in glue and silver stars and signed her name in letters so big they ran off the edge of the paper. James watched them from the doorway one evening and turned to me. If they get hurt again, we don't go back. Agreed? I nodded. But I hadn't told him yet what I'd found 2 months earlier. The thing on the credit report. The thing I was still pulling apart, piece by piece, in the quiet hours after the girls went to bed. The invitation wasn't why we were going. I had my own reason now. I should explain something about myself. I don't raise my voice. Never have. Not at work. Not at home. Not even the time a client threw a binder at my head during an audit review. I ducked. I picked up the binder. I handed it back to him and said, Page 11, second column. It's not that I don't feel things. I feel them the same as anyone. I just learned early that noise is the enemy of accuracy, and accuracy is the only weapon that doesn't backfire. In the Weston family, the loud one was always Renee. Renee slammed doors. Renee called my mother at midnight sobbing about rent and breakups and custody hearings. And my parents responded every single time, because volume is a kind of currency in families that confuse crisis with importance. I never competed with that. I was the one who picked up the pieces after Renee's noise faded. I filed the insurance claims. I called the attorneys. I co-signed when my father asked. And over the years, the family settled into a pattern. Renee made the mess. I cleaned it up. And my parents treated Renee's chaos like proof that she needed them more than I did. I didn't argue with the logic, because for a long time, I didn't see it. When you're the one holding the mop, you don't notice that nobody thanked you for showing up. You just keep mopping. I raise paper trails, not my voice. And paper trails take patience. In September, James and I applied to refinance the house. Interest rates had dropped, and we wanted to knock 3 years off the mortgage. Straightforward. Our credit was clean. Our debt to income was manageable. I'd already pre-qualified through our credit union. 2 weeks later, the loan officer called. Her name was Wendy, and she had the kind of voice people use when they're about to deliver bad news slowly. Mrs. Holloway, everything looks good on your husband's side. But on yours, there's an account here we need to discuss. She said it gently, the way a doctor says, we found something. I told her I'd review the report and call her back. James was at work. The girls were at school. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open and pulled my full Tri-Bureau credit report for the first time in years. I'd always been careful. I'd never missed a payment, never carried more than $400 on a credit card. So when the PDF loaded and I started scrolling, I expected a clean ledger. It was clean, all the way down to the 4th page, where a revolving line of credit appeared that I had never opened, with a lender I had never contacted, carrying a balance I had never authorized. The account was opened in February of 2016. I stared at the screen for a long time. February of 2016. I almost didn't scroll further. I wish I could tell you I slept first. I didn't sleep. I requested full account records from the lender that night. Transaction history, original application, authorized signatories. I used my firm's legal database to pull the filing documentation. Everything was time-stamped. Everything was traceable. That's the thing about debt. It always has. A paper trail, even when someone doesn't want it to. The lender confirmed receipt of my records request and told me to expect the documents within 10 business days. I marked the date on the kitchen calendar, the one Lily had covered in butterfly stickers, and went back to work. But something had shifted. You know the feeling when you walk into a room you've been in 1,000 times and notice a crack in the ceiling you've never seen before? And then you can't stop seeing it. Every surface becomes suspect. Every familiar corner holds the possibility that the foundation moved while you were sleeping. That's what the next 10 days felt like. I dropped the girls at school. I reviewed audit files at the office. I cooked dinner and helped Sophie with her long division and read Lily 4 chapters of a book about a talking fox. And every evening after the house went quiet, I sat at the kitchen table and pulled everything I could remember about February 2016. Because February 2016 was the month my father's contracting business went through what he called a reorganization, and it was the month he asked me to sign some paperwork he said was a formality. The records arrived on a Monday. I opened the envelope at the kitchen table after the girls were in bed, and James was on a late call with a client in Austin. The account was a revolving line of credit. Maximum limit $175,000. Opened February 9th, 2016, with Piedmont First Financial. The primary account holder was listed as Maya Weston, my maiden name, my social security number, my date of birth. The authorized cosigner field had a signature I recognized but had not written. My hand, or rather something close enough to pass a processing clerk's glance on a Tuesday afternoon 9 years ago. The first draw was $21,000, 4 weeks after the account opened. It went into a checking account I did not recognize. I turned to the next page. More draws. March 2016. $11,500. May 2016, $16,800. The pattern continued. Irregular amounts every few weeks, never the same number twice. Someone had been pulling money out of an account in my name for 9 years, and not once had a statement been mailed to my address. I checked. The mailing address on file was my parents' house. My parents' house. I set the papers down on the table and pressed my palms flat against the wood. I'm a forensic accountant. I trace exactly this kind of thing for clients who suspect their business partners of skimming. I know what it looks like when money walks out the back door wearing someone else's name. I'd just never been someone else. The account was still active. The current balance, the amount someone had drawn under my name and never repaid, was $162,000. I turned off the kitchen light and sat in the dark for a while. February 2016. I'd been 27, fresh off my CPA certification, working my first real position at a forensic accounting firm in Raleigh, still close enough to my parents to drive home on weekends and help my father with his books. His company, Weston General Contracting, had been small but steady for 22 years. Then he tried to scale up. He took on a subdivision project in Burlington that he didn't have the capital for, partnered with a developer who turned out to be leveraged to the ceiling. And when the developer pulled out mid-build, my father was left holding $175,000 in materials costs and no revenue to cover them. He called it a reorganization. What he meant was the business was bleeding, and he didn't want to say it out loud. I remember driving up on a Saturday in February. My mother had made stew. My father was at the kitchen table with a stack of papers and a face like he'd been awake for 4 days. He pushed a few pages across and asked me to sign. "Just a formality," he said. "Family cosign for the business line while we sort things out. Your credit is better than mine right now. It'll be off your name in 90 days. I signed. I was 27. He was my father. I didn't read every page. I didn't ask why a family cosign needed my social security number and date of birth on a separate form. I signed because that's what the reliable one does. And then I drove home and went back to my spreadsheets. 90 days came and went, and he never mentioned it again. And I never asked. That was the crack in the ceiling I'd been stepping over. I went back to the records. The cosign wasn't a cosign. It was a primary account application. My name, my credit, my identity used to open a revolving line that my father drew against whenever the hole got deeper. The signature on the original application was close to mine, but not mine. Whoever filled it out had either practiced or had access to enough samples to get the loops right. The mailing address was set to my parents' house from day one. No statements ever came to me, no alerts, no calls. They'd buried the account so deep that the only way I would have found it was exactly the way I did. A routine credit check for a mortgage refinance. If James and I hadn't decided to refinance, if Wendy, the loan officer, hadn't been thorough enough to flag the anomaly, I would never have known. My name would have kept carrying the debt. My credit would have kept absorbing the hits. And every Christmas, my mother would have kept taping a list to the mantle with my daughter's names missing. And I would have kept driving home in the dark, wondering what I'd done wrong. I didn't call my parents. A younger version of me might have. She would have picked up the phone and said, "Dad, what is this?" and given him a chance to explain, to minimize, to reclassify the damage as a misunderstanding. But I'm not 27 anymore. I'm a forensic accountant. I don't call people when I find discrepancies. I pull the full ledger first. So that's what I did. I spent the next 4 weeks building a ledger, not for a client, for myself. I pulled every transaction from the Piedmont First account. 9 years of draws, payments, interest charges, fees. I cross-referenced each draw against dates I could verify. Holidays, birthdays, school enrollment periods, Renee's custody hearing in 2020, the year her ex stopped paying child support. I use the same methodology I use at work. Date, amount, corresponding event, destination account. Forensic accounting is just storytelling with receipts. You lay out the numbers in order and let them narrate what happened. And what they narrated was this. The large draws clustered around 2 events every year. The first was August, back to school. The second was December, Christmas. Every August, a draw between $9,000 and $17,000. Every December, a draw between $12,000 and $22,000. The Christmas draws spiked the year my mother started the list. In December 2022, the first year Sophie and Lily were excluded, the draw was $21,600. In December 2023, the second year, it was $18,400. I printed the ledger on my office printer after hours, 14 pages. I highlighted the December draws in yellow and the August draws in blue. The pattern was so clean, it could have been a teaching example in one of my firm's training modules. And the destination, every single draw, routed to the same checking account. Not my father's business account, which had been closed since 2020. Not my parents' joint household account. A separate account at a credit union in Kannapolis, held in my mother's name alone. From that account, the money moved outward, to Renee's landlord, to Renee's car payment, to Renee's twins' private school tuition, and to a gift budget my mother tracked in a spreadsheet she'd titled Christmas Earned List Budget. I sat in my home office at 11 on a Thursday night with 14 pages spread across my desk and a calculator I didn't need. $162,000. That was the total drawn under my name across 9 years. $162,000 in credit that existed because my father needed to cover a hole he'd dug, and my mother needed to fund the life she'd built around my sister. I organized the ledger into 3 columns: date, amount, where it went. Column 3 was the one that mattered. $68,000 to Renee's household. Rent, car, utilities paid directly from my mother's Kannapolis account. $38,000 to Carter and Marcus's private school tuition at Lakewood Prep. $27,000 to what the spreadsheet called holiday and birthday gifts. The tablets, the coats, the gift cards and ornament envelopes, all the things my daughters watched their cousins unwrap while they sat on the carpet with nothing. $29,000 to miscellaneous, cash withdrawals, a bathroom renovation at my parents' house, 2 vacations I was never invited on. The numbers told a story simpler than I expected. My parents hadn't stolen my identity to feed an addiction or cover a gambling debt. They'd stolen it to fund a lifestyle they couldn't afford. One in which Renee's children were provided for, and mine were not. One in which the earned grandchildren had their tuition paid with money borrowed under their aunt's name. And one in which the easiest way to keep the secret was to keep the person whose name was on the account as far from the family center as possible. The list on the mantle was never about behavior. It was a firewall. Numbers don't get embarrassed. They just add up. And $162,000 adds up to a lot of Christmases my daughters never had. I stared at the tuition line for a long time. $38,000. Lakewood Prep. Renee had told the family she'd gotten a partial scholarship for the twins. She'd announced it at Thanksgiving 2 years ago, standing in my mother's kitchen with a glass of wine, saying that Carter and Marcus had been recognized for academic promise. My mother had beamed. My father had raised his beer. I'd congratulated Renee and meant it, because I didn't know the scholarship was my credit score wearing a costume. The earned grandchildren weren't being rewarded for good behavior. They were being subsidized with money my parents had taken from me without asking. And the ranking system, the list, the exclusion, the shrug, the maybe next year, was the scaffolding my mother built to keep the structure standing. Push Maya away. Keep Maya's branch at arm's length. If Maya doesn't come to Christmas, she doesn't ask questions. If Maya's kids don't get gifts, Maya stops showing up. And if Maya stops showing up, she never pulls her credit report out of curiosity and finds a $162,000 account she never opened. The exclusion wasn't cruelty for cruelty's sake, it was risk management. My mother, the retired school administrator, had run a better containment operation than half the CFOs I'd audited. I closed the spreadsheet and turned off my desk lamp. Outside, a neighbor's Christmas lights blinked red and green against the fence James still hadn't painted. I thought about Sophie drawing her snowflake with the uneven points. I thought about Lily's silver stars running off the edge of the paper. I thought about how they still made cards for grandparents who had spent their Christmases before they were born. Then I opened a new document and started drafting a fraud affidavit. I called Pam. Pam Edwards is a colleague at my firm, a fraud examiner with 14 years of identity theft casework and the kind of calm that comes from having seen the worst version of every family financial crime. I told her the situation over coffee on a Friday morning, and she listened without interrupting, which is how you know someone takes you seriously. When I finished, she set down her cup and said, "How far do you want to go?" I told her I didn't want to destroy anyone. I wanted my name clean, the debt off my record, and the account closed. She nodded. Then you need 3 things: a fraud affidavit, sworn and notarized, an identity theft report filed with the FTC, and a formal dispute with all 3 credit bureaus citing the fraudulent account. She paused. Once you file the affidavit, the lender is legally obligated to investigate. If the investigation confirms fraud, and it will, because the signature doesn't match and the mailing address was never yours, the debt gets reassigned to the actual party who opened the account. I asked what that meant for my parents. Pam looked at me evenly. It means the $162,000 becomes their legal responsibility. The lender can pursue collections, negotiate a settlement, or take civil action. That's between them and the bank. I sat with that for a moment. My parents would owe $162,000 to a lender they'd been hiding from for 9 years. It wouldn't be my choice. It would be the consequence of theirs. Pam helped me draft the affidavit that afternoon. By the end of November, I understood the full architecture. My father's business collapse was the origin. My mother's need to keep the family afloat, or at least the appearance of it, was the engine. Renee's financial dependence was the destination. And my identity was the fuel. The list wasn't a parenting philosophy, it was a ledger entry with a ribbon on it. Every year, my mother taped that sheet of paper to the mantle. She was reinforcing the same structure. Renee's branch gets funded, Maya's branch gets pushed out. And nobody asks where the money comes from. The "if they behave" wasn't about Sophie and Lily's manners. It was about mine. Behave meant don't dig. Behave meant don't ask. Behave meant keep being the reliable one who signs things and doesn't read the fine print. I need to stop here. If you've ever been the reliable one in your family, the one who signs, who covers, who never makes a scene, check your own credit report this week. Not because I'm paranoid, because I waited 9 years to look. 9 years of someone else's debt sitting under my name while I help my daughters make snowflake cards for the people carrying it. If this is hitting close, hit subscribe and stay with me. It gets worse before it turns. I filed the fraud affidavit on December 8th. The identity theft report went to the FTC the same day. Pam walked the dispute letters to the post office herself. Certified mail, return receipt requested, all 3 bureaus. The clock started. The lender had 30 days to investigate. By the time they reached a conclusion, Christmas would be over. But Christmas was when I needed to be in that room, in front of witnesses, with the truth in a box. I spent the first 2 weeks of December assembling what Pam called the disclosure packet. It wasn't dramatic. It was 14 pages of documentation, the same 14 pages I'd printed on my office printer, plus a cover sheet summarizing the account history, the total drawn, and the destination of funds. I added copies of the filed fraud affidavit and the FTC report. I included a 1-page timeline showing every December draw. Mapped against every Christmas, my daughters had been excluded. And at the top of the first page, in 12-point type, I printed a single line. Account number 338200047 opened in the name of Maya Holloway, née Weston, February 9th, 2016. Total drawn to date, $162,000. That was the line my mother would read first. I didn't add commentary. I didn't write a letter explaining how I felt. I didn't include a list of demands or conditions. The numbers were the commentary. Pam reviewed the packet and told me it was clean. No emotion, no accusation, just documentation. She paused. "You sure you want to do this on Christmas?" I told her it was the one day every member of the family would be in the same room. Aunt Linda would be there, Uncle Pete, the cousins. Everyone who had watched my daughters sit empty-handed while Renee's boys opened tablets would be present to hear the truth. Pam raised her eyebrows. Public accountability, I shrugged. I'm not ambushing anyone. I'm returning their paperwork. I bought a gift box from the craft store on my lunch break. Red cardboard with a removable lid, the kind you'd put a scarf in. I slid the folder inside and carried it home. The box sat on my dresser for 4 days before I wrapped it. I consulted a consumer protection attorney named David Merritt, a referral from Pam's firm. He reviewed the affidavit, the credit reports, and the transaction ledger in a single afternoon. His opinion was direct. You've already filed. The investigation is underway. Once the lender confirms the fraud, and based on these records, that's a foregone conclusion. The account gets flagged, the debt reassigns to the parties who opened it, and your credit restoration begins. 60 to 90 days. I asked about criminal exposure. Merritt leaned back. Opening a line of credit using someone else's identity without their knowledge is a felony in North Carolina. You could file a police report. I told him I wasn't going to do that. He nodded like he'd heard that answer before. Then the civil path is clean. The affidavit protects you. The lender pursues your parents for the balance. That's between them. I asked one more question. Once this is filed, can my parents talk their way out of it? Merritt almost smiled. The paperwork is already in the system. They can't unring a bell that's already been heard by 3 credit bureaus and a federally regulated lender. This isn't a conversation anymore. It's a process. A process. That word settled over me like a coat. All my life, I'd been told that the quiet ones get overlooked, that the people who don't shout get drowned out. But a process doesn't need volume. It doesn't need anger. It needs documentation, timestamps, and a signature from someone authorized to verify the truth. I had all 3. 2 weeks before Christmas, the bell was already ringing. Let me be clear about where things stood on December 14th. The fraud affidavit was filed and notarized. The FTC report was logged. Dispute letters had been received by all 3 bureaus, with certified mail return receipts in my desk drawer. The lender had opened their investigation and assigned a case number. David Merritt had confirmed in writing that the civil process was irreversible. My credit freeze was in place. The 14-page disclosure packet was printed, assembled, and sitting in a red box on my dresser. James knew everything. I'd told him the week the records arrived from Piedmont First, sitting at the kitchen table after the girls were asleep. He listened the way he always does, completely still, hands flat on the table, eyes on mine. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "What do you need from me?" Not, "Are you sure?" Or maybe we should wait? Just, "What do you need?" I told him I needed him in the room on Christmas Eve. I needed someone standing next to me who knew the truth and wouldn't flinch. He nodded once. That was it. Sophie and Lily didn't know anything. They were busy with school plays and holiday concerts and the cards they'd made with so much care. I'd already decided they wouldn't be in the room when I gave my mother the box. James would take them to the kitchen for pecan rolls. The truth was mine to deliver. The girls didn't need to see their grandmother's face when it turned white. I chose Christmas Eve for one reason. It was the only day every year when the full audience was assembled. My mother had spent 2 Christmases taping a list to the mantel and reading it aloud in front of Aunt Linda, Uncle Pete, their son Marcus, Renee, the twins, James, and my girls. She'd performed the exclusion publicly twice, because the public performance was part of the containment. If the whole family accepted that my daughters didn't deserve gifts, nobody questioned where the gift money came from. The audience was the shield, so the audience would hear the truth. On the morning of December 24th, I almost left the box behind. I was standing at the bedroom door with my coat on, keys in my hand, the box still sitting on the dresser. James was downstairs loading the car. I could hear Sophie telling Lily to hurry up with her shoes. The house smelled like the cinnamon sugar cookies they'd baked the night before, packed in a tin for the drive. I looked at the box and thought about what the next 3 hours would look like if I just left it there. We'd drive to my parents' house. We'd eat. The list would go up. My daughters would be excluded again. Renee would smile. I'd drive home in the dark and tell myself next time. The same lie for the 3rd year running. I thought about Sophie asking, "Why doesn't Grandma have my name?" I thought about Lily signing her name in letters so big they ran off the paper. For people who'd used her mother's name to pay for someone else's children. I picked up the box. It was light. That surprised me every time. How something that carried so much weight could feel like nothing in your hands. I put it in my bag between the cookie tin and my phone charger and walked downstairs. James saw the shape of it through the canvas and met my eyes. He didn't ask. He just picked up Lily, buckled her into her car seat, and started the car. The drive was 45 minutes. Sophie sang along to the radio. Lily fell asleep before we hit the highway. James kept one hand on the wheel and one on my knee. Nobody talked about what was in the bag. Nobody needed to. We pulled into the driveway at 5:10. My parents' house looked the way it always does in December. White lights along the roofline, a wreath on the door, the glow of the tree visible through the front window. Renee's minivan was already parked on the street. Uncle Pete's truck was behind it. The whole cast was assembled. I carried the cookie tin in one hand and my bag in the other. James had Lily on his hip. Sophie walked ahead, clutching the cards she'd made, already talking about where she'd put them on the mantel. The smell hit me the second my mother opened the door. Pecan rolls, warm and sweet, thick in the air. The same recipe she'd made every Christmas Eve since I was 8. For a moment, standing in the doorway with that scent wrapping around me, I could almost forget why we were there. Almost. My mother hugged Sophie stiffly and told Lily she'd gotten tall. She didn't look at me long enough to notice the bag. The living room was exactly as I remembered. Same tree, same star, same cluster of wrapped presents underneath. And there, taped to the mantel beside the stockings, a fresh sheet of paper in 16-point serif font. The list. This year it was longer. My mother had added a column, reason earned. Next to Carter's name, excellent grades. Next to Marcus's name, helped grandma with yard work. Below the boys' names, a blank space where Sophie and Lily would have been. I slipped the red box out of my bag and set it beneath the tree, behind the bigger packages where nobody would notice it yet. My mother waited until everyone had drinks and the boys were settled on the floor near the presents. Then she walked to the mantel, pulled down the sheet of paper, and held it up the way a teacher holds a spelling test she's proud of. "Before we start, I want to read the list," she said. "It's important that the children understand how this works." She read Carter's name first. Applause from Renee. She read Marcus's name. More applause. She paused at the blank space at the bottom and looked at me. "We talked about this last year, Maya. The girls are welcome to try again next year. Try again." As if my 8-year-old had failed an entrance exam. Sophie was sitting on the carpet next to me. She didn't say anything. She just looked at the presents under the tree and then down at the cards in her lap, the ones she'd spent 3 weekends making. She put them face down on the floor. Lily didn't understand what was happening. She was 5. She was watching the lights on the tree and kicking her feet. Renee leaned forward from the couch and caught my eye. She was holding a glass of wine and she smiled the same smile she'd smiled last year, the one that looks like sympathy but tastes like vinegar. "Maybe next year if they behave." Same 5 words, same weather report delivery. Aunt Linda shifted uncomfortably on the love seat. Uncle Pete studied his shoes. My father sat in his armchair with a beer balanced on the armrest and his eyes on the football game. The room waited. Everyone expected me to do what I always do. Say nothing. Pack up. Drive home in the dark. I stood up. I didn't raise my voice. I walked to the tree, reached behind the stack of silver-foiled presents Renee had arranged at the front, and pulled out the red box. Matte red paper, white ribbon, a tag in Sophie's handwriting. I carried it across the room. The carpet was soft under my feet. The football game murmured from the television. My mother was still standing by the mantel with the list in her hand, watching me with the expression she uses when she thinks someone is about to make a scene. I wasn't going to make a scene. James caught my eye from the hallway. I gave him the smallest nod, and he touched Sophie's shoulder. "Come on, girls, let's go check on the pecan rolls." Sophie hesitated. She looked at me, then at the box in my hands, then back at me. I smiled at her and meant it. "Go ahead, sweetheart. Save me one with extra glaze." James took Lily's hand and guided both girls toward the kitchen. I waited until I heard the kitchen door close. Then I turned back to my mother. The room was quiet. Renee had stopped smiling. Aunt Linda was watching me. Uncle Pete had put down his drink. My father had muted the television. The first time in my life I'd seen him do that voluntarily. I held the box out to my mother with both hands. She looked at it like it might be heavy. It wasn't. It weighed almost nothing. My mother took the box. She held it at arm's length. The ribbon shifted. Sophie's tag caught the tree light. From the girls, with a small snowflake drawn in the corner. Renee said, "That's sweet," in a voice that meant the opposite. My mother looked at me, waiting for context, an explanation, a preamble, the kind of soft introduction I always provided before anything uncomfortable. I didn't give her one. This is from the girls. Open it now. I said it quietly. The way you'd say the light is green, not angry, not pleading. Just a fact that required a response. My mother must have heard something in my voice she didn't recognize, because for the first time in 2 Christmases, she didn't look to Renee for a cue. She didn't glance at my father. She pulled the ribbon, lifted the lid, and took out the folder. It was slim. Manila, 14 pages, plus a cover sheet. She held it the way people hold documents they didn't expect to receive, loosely, as if the paper might explain itself without being read. Aunt Linda leaned forward on the love seat. The room had the particular stillness of a place where everyone has stopped breathing at the same time. My mother opened the folder to the first page. Her eyes moved to the top line. She read it. And the color left her face the way water leaves a cracked glass, slowly at first, then all at once. The first line read, account number 33820047. Opened in the name of Maya Holloway, née Weston, February 9th, 2016. Total drawn to date, $162,000. My mother's hands trembled. She gripped the edge of the folder, and her knuckles went white against the manila. She read the line again. I watched her eyes track left to right twice, and then she looked at me with an expression I had never seen on her face. Not anger, not denial. Recognition. The look of someone who has just realized the ceiling they've been ignoring has finally cracked open. The room didn't understand yet. Aunt Linda was squinting, trying to read the page from 7 feet away. Uncle Pete had leaned forward with his elbows on his knees. Renee's wineglass was frozen halfway to her mouth. My father hadn't moved. He was staring at the muted television screen like a man who has decided that if he doesn't look at something, it isn't happening. My mother's voice came out thin. Maya, where did you get this? It wasn't a question. It was a door slamming shut on a room she'd kept locked for 9 years. I stayed standing. My hands were at my sides. My voice was even. From Piedmont First Financial, the lender you used when you opened a line of credit under my name without my knowledge in February of 2016. Aunt Linda made a sound. Not a word, just an exhale, the kind that comes when the air gets knocked out of a room. My mother turned the page. The ledger, the draws, the dates, the column titled Destination. From the kitchen, faintly, I could hear Lily laughing about something. The pecan rolls were still baking. The timer hadn't gone off. I didn't shout. I didn't need to. I spoke the way I speak in audit depositions, clear, measured, citing the record. Over 9 years, $162,000 was drawn from that account. $68,000 went to Renee's household, rent, car payments, utilities. $38,000 went to Carter and Marcus's tuition at Lakewood Prep. $27,000 went to holiday and birthday gifts for the children on your list. $29,000 went to renovations and vacations I was never told about. I paused. The only sound was the kitchen timer ticking faintly through the wall. The reason my daughters aren't on that list has nothing to do with their behavior. It has to do with the fact that every gift under this tree was paid for with a credit line in my name. And the easiest way to keep me from finding out was to keep me and my children out of the room. Renee set her wineglass down so hard it rang against the coffee table. That's not true, she said. Fast. The way you say something when the truth is arriving and you're trying to outrun it. Aunt Linda looked at my mother. Carol, is this real? My mother didn't answer. She was still holding the folder, turning pages, the transaction history, the destination accounts, the spreadsheet she herself had titled Christmas Earned List Budget. Her own words, in her own spreadsheet, printed on my office paper. I let the room sit with it. I didn't fill the silence. Silence is where the truth does its best work. Then I said the only thing left to say. You didn't run out of money. You ran out of my name. My mother started crying. Not the kind of crying that means someone is sorry. The kind that means someone has been caught and hasn't figured out which version of the story to tell yet. She clutched the folder to her chest like it was the thing hurting her and not the thing she'd done. We were going to fix it, she said. We were going to pay it back. You don't understand the pressure we were under. Renee stood up. Her face had gone from shock to furious in the time it takes to turn a page. So now you're punishing my kids. You're doing this on Christmas to punish my children. I looked at her. Your children's tuition was paid with money taken from me without my consent. That's not punishment. That's an account statement. Renee opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. Aunt Linda had her hand over her own mouth. Uncle Pete was shaking his head slowly, looking at the floor. My father spoke for the first time. His voice was low. rougher than I expected, and he didn't look at me when he said it. I never wanted you to find out like this. There it was. Not, I'm sorry. Not, I shouldn't have done it. Just, I never wanted you to find out. The distinction matters. He wasn't sorry he'd taken my name. He was sorry the ceiling finally fell. For 1 second, I saw something on his face that looked like real shame. His jaw tight, his eyes wet, his hand gripping the armrest like it was the only thing holding him upright. Then he looked away. We always meant to fix it, he said. Same words, same deflection, different mouth. I let the room settle. Then I spoke one more time. The fraud affidavit was filed on December 8th. The identity theft report is with the FTC. All 3 credit bureaus have received formal disputes. The investigation is already underway, and the lender has been notified that the account was opened without my knowledge or authorization. My mother looked up from the folder. What does that mean? She whispered. It means the debt is being reassigned to the people who opened the account. You and Dad. The $162,000 is yours now, legally. My name comes off the account. My credit gets restored. The process takes 60 to 90 days. Renee's voice cracked. You went to a lawyer? You went to a lawyer against your own family? I turned to her. I went to a fraud examiner because that's what this is. Aunt Linda stood up from the love seat. She picked up her coat from the back of the chair without saying a word. Uncle Pete followed. Neither of them looked at my mother. I didn't need to explain anything else. The folder in my mother's hands explained it all. Every draw, every date, every dollar that had traveled from my name to Renee's rent check, to Marcus's tuition statement, to the silver foiled presents under this tree. The kitchen timer went off, a bright, high sound cutting through the silence. Nobody got up to check the pecan rolls. The smell drifted through the house, sweet and warm and unchanged, as if the oven didn't know that everything else had shifted. I picked up Sophie's cards from the carpet where she'd left them face down. I smoothed them flat. My girls will never earn their place at a table. Not this one, not any. Then I went to the kitchen to collect my daughters and my husband, and we drove home. The investigation took 67 days. Piedmont First Financial confirmed the fraud in late February. The signature analysis alone was enough, but the mailing address discrepancy and the absence of any communication to my actual address sealed it. The $162,000 was formally reassigned to Frank and Carol Weston. Their names, their debt, their problem. My credit score recovered by April. The refinance went through in June. James and I knocked 3 years off the mortgage, the way we'd planned before any of this started. Renee lost the tuition funding the day the lender's letter arrived. The boys transferred from Lakewood Prep to public school by March. Renee called me once in early April and left a voicemail that alternated between crying and blaming me for tearing the family apart. I didn't return the call. Aunt Linda called me separately. She said she'd had no idea, and that she was sorry she'd sat in that living room for 2 years and never questioned why Sophie and Lily were excluded. I told her I appreciated that. My parents didn't call. My mother sent a text in late February, 4 sentences about financial pressure and hoping I could find it in my heart to understand. She did not use the word sorry. She did not mention my daughters by name. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The process was working the way processes do. Without emotion, without argument, without anyone's permission. Sophie's cards are on our refrigerator now. She never asked about her grandmother's list again. A child should never have to be good enough to be loved. And neither, it turns out, should you. That's my story. 2 little names left off a list, 1 box under a tree, and 9 years of someone else's choices signed in my name. If this reminded you to pull your own credit report, or to stop earning a seat that should have always been yours, take it as your sign. Do it today. Share this with someone who needs it. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.